Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4333-400-646. This is a 4x4 single-acting spring hinge, full mortise, residential weight, lube bearing, steel base, satin nickel plated. That is a mouthful. Let's go over it right now. So, Bommer LB. LB stands for lube bearing, a maintenance-free sort of concealed bearing construction from Bommer. 4333 specifically means that this hinge, its confluence of features, square corner by 5/8 radius, location holes, okay, comes together to mean that this is for Johnson brand doors and frames. Okay, that is the 4333 part of the part number. More about that in a moment. Dash 400 means that the hinge is 4x4. That means the height of the hinge, called out first, is 4 inch and 4 inch wide. Height is always the first dimension. 646 means a couple of things. First of all, it means it's satin nickel plated, as you can see. And it also means that it's a steel base hinge. Okay? Made of satin nickel plated. Means both of those things. There is a link below this video to the template. Let's fire that up. The template calls out the one thing we haven't mentioned, that the leaf thickness is 96 thousandths, and that is typical for residential thickness doors. Also, you can see from the picture there as well, from the swag on the hinge leaf, this is a full mortised hinge, meaning that when the door is closed or the leaves are below, they're intended to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. Okay. You can see from that link to the template or cut sheet as well the location of all the screw holes. That's very important to know so that you can compare that against your existing to make sure that this is the proper one for your application. You can see where you've got the 5/8 radius and the square corner. It's non-handed, you can turn it over. We'll talk more about that in a moment as well. Now, below this video is the balance of the extended description. Primarily, the important part to this is how many spring hinges should you order for your door and frame. Bommer has a guide. If you're dealing with up to 85-pound doors, 2 spring hinges and 1 standard hinge. 110-pound doors, 3 spring hinges. Yes, you can mix and match this with standard spring hinges because the axis of pivoting is compatible. The axis of pivoting with a standard 4x4 butt hinge. So you won't have any problem with compatibility. Now, in terms of spring hinges, I'm a fan of all spring hinges. Not for the obvious reason, but the reason by which I have installed these, I've set them, I've gone back months later to reset them, to maintain them, to manage them. And I have found a much greater success when I've got a lot of spring hinges on the door rather than having not enough. Here's the reasoning. In order to get your door closed, not only closed but latched, got to have plenty of spring power to do that job. I have found that when I have 1 spring hinge and I ought to have 2, or 2 and I ought to have 3, I've got to set the tension up so high in the spring hinge to get the door moving fast enough through the closing cycle that it can end up slamming. Or it slams so hard that it bounces back open immediately. Or I set it so high that I can hear the potential damage to the internal spring. I can hear it unintentionally get torqued. I don't recall the name for when that spring is overset, but it'll start to deform. You can hear that happening, and you know that it's not. You know that you run the risk of breaking it. Also, keep in mind that with the spring hinge, you're overcoming all the air pressure, and then the friction of the latch bolt as it strikes the strike plate. I have found that 1 spring hinge, or 2 when you should have 3, there's nothing left. There's no spring power on reserve in the last 10 degrees of the closing cycle. The solution for that is to have more spring hinges. I have found that being able to share that spring power over more or all spring hinges, I can set the spring hinges moderately so that there's enough force happening in the closing cycle so that I don't have to slam it and still get it to reliably and predictably close all the time. I think of spring hinges like a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And the amount of reserve energy that's in the stored energy in the spring at the closing cycle is not very much. So you've got to multiply your chances of having enough torque there, so to speak, to get it closed. Those are my observations on spring hinges. Screws are going to be included in a complementary finish, wood and machine screws. Now, setting the tension, that's actually very easy. With every spring hinge, you're going to get a tension rod. It's that black rod there. This client's order happens to have 2, so they included 2. Not always, but you'll get at least 1. Then you're going to get a tension pin. That's the silver pin that's right there. Again, this order has 2, so there's 2. You basically take your tension rod, and with the tension collar pointed up, and if you have to flip it over, just reverse these directions. But when it's pointed up, you'll insert your tension rod into one of these holes and turn it clockwise. And as you do that, you reveal new holes. And it's into one of those new holes that you would insert your tension pin. Again, if it's upside down, turn it counterclockwise. Bommer recommends not exceeding 3 of those holes when you're setting the spring tension. And that's how the tension is set. You'll obviously install the hinge with no spring tension set, and then you'll set it, test it, set it, test it, that sort of behavior. The box that you'll likely get your hinges in has the instructions on it, along with the guide. The installation instruction link below this video also will serve that purpose as well. The last thing I'd like to show you is the Bommer logo, and right above it it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. Any questions on the Bommer number LB4333-400-646, and it's available in several different architectural finishes as well, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.